Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come and talk to us about cloud-based audio production. We will be starting in just a few moments here, just a few technical overview questions. If you'd like to submit questions during our webinar, we have a Q&A panel that you can open from the toolbar, and please submit your questions there. And we will be sometimes answering them during the flow, but sometimes we'll be waiting till the end, depending on how things are going during the actual meeting. But we will try to get to as many questions as we possibly can. So please go ahead and submit your questions as you think of them, and we'll get to them as possible. Once again, if you are not able to view the entire webcast today, we will be sending out a recording of this webcast afterward, so you can catch up with everything that we have presented today. To get started, I'd like to introduce everybody within our team here today. My name is Jim Kidwell, and I am the Principal Product Marketing Manager here at Audinate. And I have three other wonderful colleagues here, Ahmed, Will, and Bernie, and I'd like to give each an opportunity to introduce themselves. Ahmed?
My name is Ahmed Shalabi. I'm the Senior Design Consultant for Audinate. I focus mainly on helping clients getting their production environments up and running within Dante environment.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Ahmed. Thanks, Jim. My name is Will Waters. I'm Principal Product Manager here at Audinate, working with the software products and, of course, Dante Connect, which is what we'll be focusing on here. I come from a background of a lot of broadcast and production zones and a lot of different products around that, and excited to be able to, really dive into the tech today. And, of course, take it away, Bernie.
Hi there, everyone. So I'm Bernie Carpenter, the Broadcast Product Manager at SSL. So I'm working here on the SMPTE product range, which includes both, obviously, a hardware element, but also the new SMPTE Cloud that we've been working very closely with Audinate with, and I'm looking forward to discussing further today.
All right, thanks, gents. So just a quick housekeeping here. This is a webinar covering Dante Connect. We did a previous webinar not too long ago, which is available on our YouTube page as well as on our website. So we will be continuing on from that point of introduction. So while we'll be doing some introductions here, we will be going into a lot more deep dive integrations of Dante Connect today. So if you're finding that we're going too deep too fast, I recommend that you step back and go into the other webcast, and then you can watch the recording of this one. So Dante Connect, just brief overview. It's a collection of Dante products that leverage the cloud as infrastructure. What does that mean? That allows you to actually take some of your production workflows and move them up into the cloud, utilizing a variety of partners that we have with other mixing consoles and things like that have been pushed into the cloud. And our primary example here is the SSL SMPTE infrastructure that has been moved into the cloud. So that's the basic description of what we're going to cover today. And as I said, again, if you need the basic introductions, please step back to the other webcast, and then we can go from there. Hey, take it away.
Yeah, well, Jim, well, part of that comes into is just like, well, what's the point? Why we're doing this? Again, we covered a lot of the high level there, but just to let everyone here know, and you can kind of remind that is that bringing in audio into your cloud productions has a lot of challenges and a lot of complexity. However, there's a lot of things that as we over the last decade and a half or so, as audio and production has been moving into that IT world, we've been able to deliver a lot more flexibility and a lot more capability and be able to really get the content out in the way that is useful for those that are wanting to consume whatever that content is. So why Dante Audio for Cloud? Well, number one, it allows for discrete Dante audio flows to be able to come from on-prem and integrate directly into software applications that are running basically in the cloud. This provides a lot of flexibility. And previously, or up until the point of having something like Dante Connect, the way that you had to do that was always needing to mux in with video channels. Now, there can be advantages to doing that when you're looking at certain contribution flows, but fundamentally, when you are thinking about an entire or full production, many times you need to have a lot of discrete audio, whether that's intercom, whether that's digital microphone arrays, whether that's other sources that you need to be able to mix and have with gear that you might already have on-prem, or be able to deliver that into multiple locations or even expand out to multiple regions. So having the ability to not have to basically mux or combine that with video streams can be highly advantageous and flexible. Of course, being that it's all on the network means that the scalability is built in. And this is really an important component and fundamentally why we've all been pushing to the technology to be able to deliver what we're delivering today, is that it's not just moving to the cloud or using the cloud for the cloud purposes, but it's really to have that scalability and the flexibility to be able to get to the viewers and the listeners where you need them to be, or where they happen to be rather. And then of course, because we can do that, we can then now start distributing the talent, meaning that talent can really arguably be anywhere. And we found this out through the course of the pandemic and distributed production. But once you're in the cloud, you have the ability to really have your best production team wherever they happen to be accessing those same resources. And once that takes place, well, then there's a whole new level of workflows that can be revealed, because now you have access to compute, you have access to content and sources that previously may have been unavailable if you had to think about things from point-to-point connections, and with kit that happens to be co-located in a single rack or basically down the hall. And finally, delivering the ability for the software implementations to be able to be updated in the world of IP security, being able to move quickly, as well as being able to change even features, being agile again to consumer demand is really important. And we get all of these things together. So it was really important here at Audinate for us to be able to expand and also allow both our OEM partners, our software partner vendors, as well as our end user customers to be able to have those workflows that they are used to, but extending into this world of software reality. So if we continue on, this is a really important concept that I think that we want to make sure that we continue to push forward today, is that when you're in the cloud production, you don't always have to think about running the audio and the video together from on-prem to the cloud, especially in terms of things like again, those digital microphones when you have a lot of stacked audio sources, or with intercoms where you really need to have a completely separate path of audio for your production, but being able to really have that in a way for your A1s, your audio designers, your audio engineers to be able to deliver an audio presentation and a production in a way that's transparent and we know how to do audio productions and broadcasts. Let's keep many of those workflows, but being able to bring them and also take advantages of software and cloud. So if we can continue on, that brings us into really why we have amazing partners. And Bernie, if you can take us into that, and we of course are here with SSL, and we've seen a lot of fantastic things happen with SMPTE with the use in the cloud.
Thanks, Will. So I think the thing that I'd like to build on what Will's saying, really to reiterate, is that being able to do broadcast productions from the cloud opens up a few new doors. It's another way of doing things. One of the key benefits really being, as Will mentioned, the scalability. Whether that's a production facility, maybe you now have the ability to scale the size of that facility on demand, so you don't have to spend as much on the upfront infrastructure. Or it could be the flexibility, the fact that you can do things like remote production, where you have people in different geographical areas around the world working on the same production. That having the cloud backbone has really facilitated these in a much simpler way than was possible before. And all of these together can lead to cost efficiencies. So these are some of the key reasons why people will be looking at cloud production. And then Jim, if we could go on to the next slide, particularly for System T, there are a number of applications where this is really beneficial. So one of those being, like I've said, remote production. The fact that you can now have your processing in the cloud and have your contribution or your mix position from separate locations or multiple locations opens up a new way of doing remote production. Disaster recovery is another interesting example where if people need to have a backup for a particular facility, this could now be cloud-based. So it removes some of the infrastructure cost that you would traditionally have had with a DR solution. You can also use it to provide additional production capacity. So the ability to go above and beyond the normal number of studios you might need in a given facility without having to spend all of the money upfront, capital expenditure. It becomes a more viable way of doing this. So those are the applications that we're seeing System T Cloud being used for today already. And back to you, Rob.
Yes. So System T utilizes the Dante technology in software. And, that's one of the things that is pretty fantastic. But it is important, and I think, everyone to know is when we talk about Dante Connect here at Audinate, it's not a single product. It actually is a suite of tools that allow for the Dante network to be extended out into these software worlds and these cloud networking environments. Again, if you refer back to our previous webinar, we can go through each of these individual components in a little more detailed way. But fundamentally, we have some components that you're familiar with, such as our Dante Domain Manager. This allows for some orchestration, the ability to enroll and manage various domains within the Dante environments. We have virtual sound cards that allow for interaction with applications that are running in the cloud that may not be Dante native just yet. Of course, as Bernie just mentioned, we have the devices and applications that utilize our Dante SDKs to be able to integrate Dante directly into their applications. And then we have tools that allow for being able to work with variations of latency and timing, such as our Dante Gateway components, and then enhancements for your production that utilize standard tools such as WebRTC in your standard browser to be able to do remote contribution and monitoring into these productions. And these are just one of the things, again, at that bottom level, that remote contribution and monitoring is just a value add, because now that we're in the cloud, we actually have media running and accessible in ways that we didn't have before. So that's already an enhancement that just really is able to come along with something like a Dante Connect enabled ecosystem. Again, Bernie, if you can, that's like the components that we have, but how does that operate then, within the SSL environment?
Yeah, it's a good question, and there are, I think, System T. A lot of people will already be familiar with System T and the high level of Dante integration it has already. This continues on into the cloud. So System T is a distributed platform. We have we need some processing, some audio processing. We need a control interface. And then we'll have I/O devices. And all of these elements have various levels of Dante integration. So when it comes to the cloud, this is where we've been able to take one of the Dante Connect elements. So as Will mentioned, Dante Connect being this umbrella term for many things, we've taken the Dante Connect SDK and we have built that into our virtual engine. So we have a native 256 channel on and off ramp for the audio using Dante in this virtualized environment. So it's a really powerful tool that we've been able to pick up and utilize to get a large amount of I/O in and out of our engine, benefiting from everything else that Dante provides. From a control perspective, our software, whether that's in just a simple software application that we call TCA or a control surface, it includes the Dante API, so we can manage the routing on the network to and from our engine from our devices or between third-party Dante devices as well. And then from a connectivity point of view, we have a range of I/O devices which utilize Dante hardware chipsets in them, but equally any third-party Dante device or the Dante software interfaces can be hooked up to the system, and the console can see it, discover it, and manage the routing. So one SMPTE is it's a distributed platform with these three elements. They all have levels of Dante integration that are key to the product being able to do what it can do. If we could jump onto the next slide, Jim. So just to provide an overview, thanks to the Connect SDK, we have the 256 channels of I/O to and from the Dante network. The console itself also provides 256 fully processed paths. Just like on the ground, we also have the integrated effect track in the system. And thanks to the API, we can do the Dante routing in the software. And then you can hook up, and this is probably one of the key parts for people to take away really. You can take any of the hardware control surfaces, whether it's a simple fader tile and a PC screen or a fully blown control surface, and you can connect it up to the cloud to provide the same operational experience that you'd be used to in a traditional hardware environment through a cloud-based system. Operationally, they can be a very, very similar process. Next slide, Jim. Thank you. And again, this is purely just to demonstrate what those different elements could look like. So from a control perspective, it could be anything from software in a fader tile through to this very large control surface. I/O, it could be an SSL I/O device utilizing Dante and utilizing Dante Connect to get those sources from the ground to the cloud, or it could be a third-party Dante device or a software-based Dante interface, either running on the cloud or the ground. Alongside our processing, when it comes to SMPTE Cloud, we have a virtualized Tempest engine to provide that processing. And then here, finally, this is just to show how those things sit and where they would be. So within our cloud environment, you need both a control instance, so that's our software running virtually in the cloud, and then we have our DSP software, which is where we are utilizing the Dante Connect SDK to provide the I/O to and from the engine. You then have your mix position, which could be anywhere. It could be in a traditional studio facility in a very nice control room environment, or it could be at somebody's house, simply utilizing a desktop fader tile and some speakers for some monitoring. And then the venue, wherever that is, that will need a way of getting those sources into the cloud, just like Will spoke about earlier.
Indeed. Actually, but Jim, before we go back to that, Bernie, if I could just bring in that, I think that this is one of the things that is really important here. Like one of the things that we as the technology providers are really working hard to do is really make that operation transparent, right? To those that are operating. You mentioned the mixed desk environment. I mean, what is that experience like for that mixed desk operator?
It really is exactly the same. It's the same software and it's the same everything, the same interfaces that you would have if you were running a traditional system based on the ground. So yes, your sources will be coming in a different way, but operationally, how you make the routes to the console, how you mix on the surface, the processing that you have available is all identical.
Indeed. And I think that's one of the things that I think our listeners, our viewers here are interested to kind of get into. So Jim, if we can move to this next slide. This is where we'll hopefully dive into a few different things. And I see some questions are already starting to pop up in the chat, and we appreciate that. Some of them we'll try to get to. If not, we'll have some time here a little bit at the end. But this is where I want to introduce and make sure we have Ahmed, into the conversation here to kind of help us walk through some of these different things. So this is a very high-level example of what we would have with a remote production environment. On the left-hand side here, we have what we're calling our media center. So let's call that our on-prem location. We have traditional Dante hardware. Those were those devices, as Bernie was mentioning, that have Dante hardware chipsets in them. They're integrated with Dante in some sort. And they're basically, we have the ability to push that in to the cloud. Now, I already see that there's a few questions here regarding, well, how do you actually transport that from on-prem to the cloud? Well, we are utilizing, if you notice right here, AWS Direct Connect. And I don't know, Ahmed, if maybe I can ask, excuse me, while I clear my throat, a little bit of your expertise on, well, I mean, what is AWS Direct Connect? Maybe if you could just start there.
Well, for this to happen, to be able to bring a Dante network to your AWS environment, you need AWS Direct Connect, and that effectively means peering with AWS. Now, this involves some requirements. You can work with an AWS partner, or your network might be collocated in a location that already has AWS Connect. There are some prerequisites for the network in terms of BGP support with authentication and some. And if you're going to go that route, then I definitely recommend checking AWS routing policies for BGP. There are a few other things, but effectively you are peering directly with AWS as a service provider.
And
That way.
Sorry, please go ahead.
And that way you are effectively on one Ethernet connection between your media center or your environment on-prem with AWS.
And I think that's really kind of an important component of it, because those that have been doing things with cloud and have done things in the past, you know, a lot of times there's some type of manipulation, some type of compression, different things you have to go. When we talk about Dante Connect, we are actually basically moving that same Dante, that uncompressed audio, across that connection line. And of course, now this is actually a really important component. I do want to say this right here. We'll give this multiple times, but this is not specific to AWS. We have Dante Connect, and what we're doing here is not only AWS compliant, but we do need to have a really high reliability, highly stable connections to be able to utilize that. And AWS provides their direct connect component. In the Google world, that's called Google Interconnect, but there are multiple ways to go about it. But this is what we're going to feature here because, well, let's be honest, that's what a lot have already worked with and a lot are already used to. We'll notice that there is a 40 millisecond statement right here. Ahmed, can you explain that a little bit?
Of course. So those of you who have used Dante before or have already some Dante hardware and software know that each device has some limitations or capabilities when it comes to the RX latency. So it's important to understand that this is the maximum the device will be able to receive in the AWS side or on the on-prem side. We have a solution for this in case you are doing some productions where you are sending stuff in remote locations where the latency is greater than 40 milliseconds. This is where Gateway comes in. Gateway is able to receive at a very long latency up to 900 milliseconds in case you need it, and it can transmit back at 1 milliseconds or two milliseconds within region.
And that really is the kind of, I guess, the magic, as we say. It's really the technical component that allows us to have this asynchronous latency domains, right, between what would be happening on-prem or what would be happening in the cloud. If you notice in our drawing here, once that you have the gateway component, I realize that we have our audio coming in this way, and then the gateway is set over here on the right side, but it's actually helping us to provide that clocking component that's within that AWS environment. Did I get that right, Ahmed?
That's correct. So the gateway, I think of it as a utility device. So it does two very core components within cloud production environment. It takes time sync from your cloud provider, whether that's AWS or somebody else, and it distributes precision time protocol to Dante endpoints within the cloud, and it also does this asynchronous latency that we just touched upon, Will and I.
Excellent. And then, of course, as Bernie mentioned before, the hardware panels or the connection in this particular example, that actually runs directly for the System T control application that is then driving the SSL. Bernie, did I get that all correct?
You did indeed. Yeah, I think an interesting thing to point out is that that control position, it could be somewhere where there is Dante hardware, maybe utilizing gateway through Direct Connect. It is also possible, thanks to remote monitor as well, that you have the mix and the mix position with your monitoring feed could be done in a very different way, and it doesn't necessarily have to have the same network requirements that you would have where you had the hardware contribution.
Indeed. Now, once you have this here, of course, we're showing this with the SSL environment all within the cloud. And this is really simple, right? Because, hey, a lot of this could like probably sit right in the rack within your studio if you needed, but we can then start expanding on this. But before we move off of this slide, I do want to show something here. This remote monitor component, as I mentioned before, because now these audio signals are flowing in the cloud, we do have the ability to tap into that Dante network and then push directly to a client that is utilizing a web browser. In this case, it could even be to a mobile client that is able to, this shows up in the Dante controller. It's a remote monitor patch that basically goes to a web page. Now, it's not shown in this slide, but we do have a remote contributor that operates in the same way as well, to give you individual channels that you can then push back up into the cloud if you are needing to do that in a way that is not, say you don't have the direct connect, AWS direct connect component to every single contribution point. Now, this is something that has to be specific to the workflow, but it does give you options depending on what you need and how you need to plan out your system. But let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. And, kind of get into, let me clear my annotations out of the way, into some expansion out from all this. Again, this is not necessarily cloud specific, although we've seen most of our clients working in the AWS environment so far, but it does give opportunity. So we see this a lot in sports, for instance, having the ability for a sports commentator to be able to use native Dante and push that directly over that direct connect connection into the AWS environment, directly into System T, then be able to mix that back at a separate mix station, but also having intercom all put together. Now, if we can move on again, there was an actual real world example that was delivered back in the spring in North America with AWS and NHL in a live cloud production, where a successful broadcast was actually pushed out for remote production of NHL games. But one of the things that goes along here, again, is some of these things that we've been saying. The ability to have independent and discrete audio allows not only the production components to come together, but also the intercom and other audio that may be flowing within the production that is not necessarily always attached to specific video channels or specifically for output. This is really important. So if we bring to the next slide, this is a lot that's going on, but we did want to kind of dive into some of these details here before then actually diving into a bit more of the technical demo and actually showing you some of these things. Now, I realize for some of you, this may be a little hard to see on that. So I know that there's a lot that we have to look at here, but hopefully this demonstrates, in a very good way, what we're talking about today. Maybe you have the ability to zoom, or you can go back and look at some different things. But if you have the situation, basically here was that audio and video and sources were coming from the Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C., but all the production was happening in the AWS cloud environment. And operators and contributors were distributed. Many of them were in New Jersey, but really that wasn't necessarily the only place the production staff was located. But as you can see here, basically this allowed for separation in many ways. And the blue line here being the video component for the production, this light blue line being what we utilizing nice DCV, which is a remote desktop component within AWS to allow for access to instances for applications, and for operators to be able to drive various components throughout the production. But on the audio side, which is where we'll focus today, is in this red line here. And you see that there was intercom on-prem, also utilizing one of those Dante gateway components that Ahmed was mentioning. That's actually a software component that he can run either in the cloud or it can run on-prem if necessary or if required. And that delivers audio into the production that allowed for the components that were running Dante software applications, part of the Dante Connect software applications, whether they were obviously everything controlled by the DDM, but mixing and play out happening, mixing happening in the solid state logic System T environment, as well as being able to drive into, say, VizRT vector for both playback and insertion, and also combining with the video streams for final output. There's also a lot of use of the Sienna processing engine, which is also another Dante SDK partner that be able to take Dante directly in and being able to mix that or combine that or take from other transport signals that may happen in any type of production. And then, of course, fundamentally be able to deliver that out to various gateways for being able to be monitored, to have intercom, and of course to be able to have the announcer box to be able to have the appropriate contribution there. So this was a really exciting production. Not only was this done in as a test, we've actually had similar productions happening, many places around the planet in very similar ways, similar jobs. But I think it's important now that we actually show you some of the things going on, because we actually have this all set up and running in AWS today. So if we can move on, I think, I don't know, Ahmed, if you want, no, maybe Bernie, we want to show that we have SSL actually running, where is it, in Frankfurt today, over in Germany?
It is, yes, I think, yeah. And yeah, I'd be happy to share.
One question while we're getting ready here. This question's been asked a couple of times already, is where does the audio and video sync happen?
So in the particular examples, I mean, this is one of the things that it will need to be specific to the production design. But for instance, what we did with the AWS, or excuse me, the NHL production was that fundamentally that was married up in the VizRT vector. I was able to utilize the Dante virtual sound card to pull in all the audio sources. That was the final program mix that was done on the SSL console. And then that was married with the video to then be sent out for distribution. There are other ways, again, it can go through that with the Sienna processing engine. They have components to be able to align and then marry up the audio and the video so that that can then be delivered for purpose.
Great, thank you. All right, take it away, Bernie.
Perfect. I might need you to stop your share. Perfect. Thank you. And then let me share this. Okay. So what we're looking at here is the Tempest Control app, which is actually running in the cloud. And the key thing to remember is that this software that we are seeing here is exactly the same software interface that you would see if you were sat in front of a hardware control surface on the ground. So it's doing a few things. Firstly, it's connecting to our virtualized processing engine, where I can dynamically choose how. So if I jump over here and go into my setup page, we have the ability, just like on a fully hardware console, we can do exactly the same thing. We can allocate those 256 paths to be used for channels or buses in exactly the same way. Any of them can be in any format, from mono all the way through to 9.1.6 if you're doing immersive productions. Once you have those, you can then lay out those paths as you want to see them. And again, this could be done if you had multiple operational positions. Each of them could have their own views, different paths that just they are seeing or controlling, or they could be sharing. You could have two locations where they will be taking it in turns, handing off to do the mix for a particular program. You can then go in, and if we jump to our setup page, I can show you some of the routing functionality. So remembering that the SystemT software, what we're looking at here, contains the Dante API built in. So I'm able to go and either look in what we call our logical devices, so we can go and take a particular source and say where we want it to get routed. I can make that route, and that is doing a network-based route. So it's doing the Dante route from the console to the virtual engine, and then it's pulling that into a particular channel. Or I can look at a physical network where I can actually go and see the entire Dante network, like you would in Dante controller. And from there, we could go and see a particular device. We also store the offline devices, so you have the capability of preparing these show files just like you would on the ground. We can go in and we could take a particular port, and I could route that somewhere into the console. So the operational experience, whether in the cloud or on the ground, is the same. And the software, just to sort of prove it, here we have our Windows environment where, again, I can move between these different applications, but they're just running in our cloud instance. Hopefully that makes sense, but I'll look through a couple of the questions, and I don't know, Ahmed, maybe if we could tie in how that appears from a Dante controller point of view as well, if that's something you're able to show, that I think that would be a useful next step, maybe.
Sure. Thank you, Bernie. I'm gonna send a request to share. Okay. Are you gonna see my screen?
We can see your screen, and we have a lot of sources, and it looks like a few different domains.
Right, right. So we are in the Dante Connect domain. This is, of course, Dante Controller. It's the new version. So I'm sure you've seen Dante Controller before. So right now I am logged into Dante Domain Manager. As you can see here, it's running in AWS. It is in Frankfurt as well, logged in with my credentials. And I am in the right domain where SystemT is, among some other instances. And what we see here is different subnets in multiple regions in our AWS demo environment. You can see some regions in the US, some on-prem locations. We have Will's house here, by the way. He has a couple of Dante devices are showing.
Actually, I think that you have right there. Then just quickly on this. Sorry to interrupt, Ahmed, but we said Frankfurt a couple times, but actually we're doing a little bit of distributed thing here today, right? Because I believe both you and Bernie are in the UK.
Yes.
Sorry for revealing location. Hopefully that's not too
Correct.
too close. Jim, you're all the way out in Portland. I'm over here in Texas, in the US. But this Avio actually is connected into this same environment that potentially could route to Bernie's SystemT environment.
That's correct, yes. So we can see here some on-prem devices, so we can send some audio to Will if he wanted to get involved in this mix, or maybe he can contribute. We have some other devices as well in Frankfurt, and some in our UK office, and some in Japan. So really, in terms of routing and managing your devices, it's very similar or identical, more like to any Dante environment in terms of routing and viewing your clocking status and network status as well. Will, is there something else you think?
Yeah, well, I
we've-
think that there's one other thing to say here. So we have, we've been able to organize a few of these things right into our location centers. I think that one of the questions that comes up in many ways, though, is that, what, I guess in many ways, what does this take to work into? So there does need to be some awareness of how to operate in the AWS or the cloud environment. You do need to understand, how to set up your routes and your ability to set up networking and be able to bring that into, connect into your on-prem environment. We, of course, have reselling and partners, and we'll talk about this a little bit here in a moment, about helping you to put that together, be able to set that out. But a lot of times that is specific to what your environment happens to be and your particular production needs. But the things that come in a lot of times that people ask about or they may run into are things like, well, what about latency? And what's the different cases there? So if just from this view, Ahmed, can we kind of show where that gateway sits in and what that component does? Because it kind of pops up, right? Like those gateway components. We have a lot of things that are operating here in our, I guess, here in the center, right? In this zone where we have actually, there's quite a few things running in our AWS environment, multiple mixing devices, of course, the Viz vector unit, various things to be able to work with. How do we keep all of that managed?
So let me share a couple of things first. So let me first touch upon where gateway comes in. So if we this is system T, right? So this is what Bernie is receiving right now. And if we try to send the same source to somewhere like Tokyo, for example, and we say we are receiving from this. So we are trying to send a couple of channels from Frankfurt all the way to Japan. The second, and if we take a look here, yes, it is receiving the audio, but it's at 117 milliseconds, and that's not going to work. And the way to get around this, and this is where gateway comes in, is to patch this directly first to gateway. Gateway will be able to cope with that kind of latency. And then from within gateway, you can, it's a long list. Give me a second.
We have to start making use of our filters.
Exactly. Right. So, and once you've patched it through gateway, so effectively double patching it, you can see it's now receiving at a latency it's able to cope with. So now you can send that audio from end to end, if you like. So that's the first component I wanted to talk about. The second thing we wanted to touch upon is latency. Latency really comes down to, it depends on your network. So when it on-prem, it depends on how your network is designed, whether there are QoS policies, whether there are a lot of routing-based or conditional routing happening on your on-prem network. In terms of peering with AWS, again, that depends on the partner you work with and the kind of location you have. We've seen single-digit latencies from within on-prem to the AWS environment. Direct connect. In terms of cloud, depends on the cloud provider. So we've seen single digits within region, between regions, depends where. But again, within your cloud environment, you can utilize gateway if you're using if you're doing something that is so far away that devices are not able to cope with the latency configuration it has. You can use gateway to get around this if need be.
Indeed. And I think all of these things, it's important to say that and I know we get asked this question a lot. Well, what do I need for specifically? And it's that classic answer. Well, a lot of it depends, because it depends on your location. It depends on what you're looking to do. It depends on your network environment. And we can wrap all of these things together. the important thing I think to bring about here is that, again, we're not just talking about all this for the sake of doing so. This enhances the ability to extend out your workflows and give you an opportunity to really do things that maybe have been previously unavailable before, whether that is allowing for your remote operators and distributed production, or it's able to access that content that may already be in the cloud. This is something that's coming up quite a bit now, where you want to be able to access archival content, or you want to be able to send your audio into some type of a device that allows for automatic translation, multi-language support, being able to really integrate into productions that are delivering into, well, utilizing components that frankly you just cannot fit into a classic OB truck, or just you would have locally on-prem. So it's not to just move what we have today into the cloud, it's to really deliver out that flexibility. So I know that we're coming up here on 45 minutes through. Ahmed, is there anything else within Dante Control? I mean, I know there's a whole lot of other stuff that you know, we're utilizing, of course, Dante Controller there. DDM is a component that's running in the background here that's, you know, doing some effort and work there. Can you explain to us a little bit why that component's necessary?
So DDM is the management, orchestration, and control plane of the solution. So it manages your devices. It's access control. So it manages your user, who has access to what, and does auditing as well. And it also manages your licensing. So it, go
Sorry, I
ahead,
was just
Will.
going to say that you brought out something that I think that I hear sometimes for production. Like when you went up to that top right corner, right, and you logged in under what you said was Ahmed. That's actually user control, meaning that this is a really long list and a massive situation we have here. But because we're utilizing Dante Domain Manager as a part of the solution, you can actually assign various roles with devices and routes particular to users. Is that correct?
So DDM comes with 4 default roles: a read-only, and an admin, and and 2 others in between with varying different levels of privileges. Some can utilize clocking or modify clocking, and some can do subscriptions only. But you also have the ability to define custom roles, and you can apply those by default for specific users. And you can mix and match, really. So you can do the least privilege, do the most privilege. It's really up to you when it comes to access control. Nobody will be able to see or access or modify your Dante environment unless they are properly authenticated and authorized, of course.
Excellent. And of course, you're doing this directly from your desktop, but you could bring up your remote apps, or excuse me, your nice DCV or your remote desktop, and be able to run any of these other products that would be in that same Dante Connect environment, right?
Of course, we can open a DCV and bring in VisVector or any other product that we would like to utilize. That's easy, of course, as well.
Excellent. So I think that, you know, also, Jim, I'm trying to be mindful of time here as well. I think we have a couple things that we want to, you know, just talk about. I know there's already been some questions regarding just access and on the market side and everything like that. But I don't know, Jim, you want to describe this a little bit before we get into a Q&A?
Yeah. I just wanted to cover a quick few things. There have been a number of questions about, like, what are the types of applications that are available for cloud-based production? What does the ecosystem basically look like, and what is supporting it? So one of the things that I did want to stress is that we have released official support for AWS and Google Cloud as hosting partners. So we have deployment guides that are available for both AWS and Google Cloud. Now, we also have integration partners who have done implementations into private networks, into dark fiber networks, and that is working quite well. So that is possible as well. People were asking specifically about Azure. Azure, we don't have a specific deployment guide for that yet, but it is possible. I mean, all of this stuff is possible to run on cloud environments. So we will be exploring that based on demand, of course. But the demand right now has been laid mostly with AWS and Google Cloud being the primary players there. The other applications and products that are from the people you see on screen are either currently supported natively using the Dante Connect SDK. So that means that they've built Dante directly into their application, or it's utilized using Dante Virtual Sound Card, which is deployed in a container in the cloud. So when you're utilizing Dante Virtual Sound Card in the cloud, you do get a higher channel count than you would with the product that you purchase directly from us. So there's a larger limit of the number of channels there. And we are currently expanding the ecosystem as demand increases. So if you have an application that you're looking for cloud-based support, please send them our way, and we would be happy to work with them for that. It is a free integration for OEM partners to do that. So just have them chat with us. One other thing that is very critical here is that because a lot of these implementations can be, as you are probably understanding now, that a little more complicated, we work with integration partners to deploy these technologies. So these are our current integration partners for Dante Connect, and this is an expanding environment. But right now, we've worked with these particular partners to make sure that they're fully up to speed and can both give you the quality of service that you would expect to have a Dante Connect experience installed in your environment. So one thing before we move into the Q&A, thank you everybody for joining us. Please continue to add your questions into the Q&A panel, and we'll get to as many as we can. If you would like to reach out to any of us, our contact details are on the screen. And then we also have a lot more information that is available on getdante.com/connect, and then you'll be able to pick stuff up. Now, moving into the Q&A.
Actually, Jim, sorry for the interruption. If you go back up one slide on that, because I do want to answer a question that goes in the Q&A real quick on someone asked, well, why isn't pricing made publicly? And if I can just address that quickly, I want people to know that pricing, there's a few different pricing options that are available. We do, as Jim mentioned, there's complexity, and we also have found that many customers have different requirements or looking for levels of integration support. And this is why we utilize our reselling channel, because we at Audinate, we work through partners. We deliver technology that our OEM providers work with, our independent software vendors integrate with, and of course our reselling partners allow for, which then delivers a full solution system. So there are options for if you're doing a single event and you just need something like this for a few days and you want to work through that, or if this is something that you're going to be utilizing pretty much on an evergreen or a continual basis, where we're going to be doing something on a more annualized basis. But the question, or I really want to drive this home, is that this is something that we absolutely want to talk about. We want to work with you and your partners, and let's have some conversations about that. So I think with that, Jim, if you can take it back, and we can start working on the QA.
Sure. There's quite a few questions in here. There was one in particular that Andy asked about. So can you talk about instance redundancy and AWS server / VPC availability, dedicated versus shared tenancy, etc.?
Well, Ahmed, is that something that you want to take first?
Sure. Can you read out the question again, Jim?
Okay.
Sorry.
I just clicked answer. Oh, can you talk about instance redundancy and AWS server and virtual private cloud availability? So I guess we're talking about redundant workflows here and failover in case something goes bad.
Well, I would say you can definitely utilize two redundant environments. There is no limitation on that front, but remember that DDM in AWS does not support redundancy. These limitations you need to be aware of.
Yeah, that is true. And this is one of those things where our goal, and I say this, a product manager and looking forward, is that our goal at this stage is to enable the expansion in the workflow while we increase, and we are working with in fact, I know that there's been multiple tests and workshops. This actually been multi-vendor with AWS technical team on things like, what would be defined as the best way to go about high availability or failovers, or what if for some reason someone decides to close your cloud environment down. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that we get into with software in production. I think the standard design though and engineering rigor applies though. You can work on redundancy, and it's always good to have a plan and a backup plan. But there's also we have to keep things in line with the budgets and the availability. So we will continue to enhance that as we go along.
All right, thanks. Matthew asks, does the Dante Gateway deal with internet jitter / packet loss as well as the latency issue?
In terms of jitter, every device, whether it's Dante Embedded Platform or any other implementation in the cloud like DVS or something else, they all have varying tolerance levels when it comes to jitter. So this is the first thing you will see whether the device is able to clock properly or not. So whether Gateway does some magic to address this, it doesn't do anything differently than most Dante hardware and Dante software, but it has a tolerance limit at which point it will not clock.
Okay, thank you. Next question it's a fairly general one, but Sten is asking about ST2110. So I'm curious, like how does ST2110 play into a Dante-specific workflow?
Well, I think that I'll take that one real quick, and then I don't know, Bernie, if you have any thoughts on what you've seen from or what SSL has seen or discussed around this. But I think that with 2110, what we have been looking at is that fundamentally things are now on the network, and that's where things are good with this. 2110, at least from an audio standpoint, it tends to bring things in with that video first from a workflow design standpoint. We don't have any specific, like within the Dante Connect, like from Audinate conversion at this stage. However, we do have the SDK, which allows for our partners to be able to ingest and ingest 2110-30 streams or AS67 streams and deliver Dante, and the vice versa, be able to take Dante and deliver that back out. So again, this is one of the reasons why currently we are working mainly with integration partners to be able to ensure that the appropriate product mix is available for whatever your needs or your design would be.
Yeah, I'll just add very quickly to, I think one of the considerations with 2110 when it comes to cloud is multicast, and the environments that the cloud environments where how the multicast is being handled is key. And there are different ways of going about that depending on the environment and depending on the products that you're using. But that challenge isn't there with the Dante solution.
All right, thank you. Nilesh has a question for us. He says, what about the network security? A lot of corporate IT teams are not allowing this workflow. So I guess, how would you implement some network security in this entire process?
I think that this is always an interesting question. One of the things that I come in and, I'll let my co-panelists here get into, a more intelligent answer. But I've always found that a lot of that has to do with the appropriate communication, and the IT, especially on the security side, they want to mainly know what it is that's happening on the network, what's going on, what is this protocol doing, and what should we be expecting. Which is many times the bigger challenge than the actual technical components that go along with that. But I don't know if my co-panelists want to add to that. We do deliver, and we are absolutely willing to work with being able to deliver the information about how the Dante protocol is operating, and what to expect as it plays on a network.
And there is no shortage of documentation on our website on how the protocol functions and how you can secure it. We also have our wonderful support team and others that can have these conversations and help explain more and recommend if need be. In terms of management traffic, this is all encrypted. Network access control, we touched upon that as well. In terms of media encryption, I believe, if I'm not wrong, that has been announced already. Jim, Will, right? Yeah, so that will depend really on the adoption from partners. So you should be able to see it getting rolled out as it gets in the field.
Yeah. I say that is something that, just to be clear on that, in media encryption and then network security, I think, it's important to kind of keep those things separated in our brains a little bit like that. Yes, with media encryption, that will be a rollout over time based off of partner adoption and, of course, the full roadmap that goes along with that. But as Ahmed stated, when it comes to network access and security or getting just access to the network itself, I mean, we're on the network. We give the information, and we always suggest and really encourage appropriate security. I mean, this is one of the things about Dante, and what we at Audinate do is that we are really looking at ensuring that we are as friendly and as compliant, and making sure that we're thinking about security as we are continuing development on our protocol.
All right, thanks. Here's another question. It says, this is Orlando asks maybe a little bit more basic question, but maybe this is more just like to the structure of Dante Connect itself. It says, if I have an audio transmission in one end of the country and reception in the other end of the country, what elements are involved or necessary with Dante Connect? So I think that would be, like it may be a contributor on one end of the country and receiver on the other end of the country. I guess let's talk about what pieces would need to be required for that to function.
Yeah. Anybody want to take it?
I'm happy to take it. That's not a problem. It really depends on the use case and the workflow. If you're trying to connect two sites, it's very, very different from doing a cloud production. These are two very different things. If you're trying to connect two sites, there are extensive documentation on our website on how to do this. But if it's a cloud environment, then you would definitely need AWS Direct Connect, the components we just spoke about, AWS Direct Connect least. You need to have some Dante devices on-prem. You need to have a network ready to be peered with AWS, with BGP, authentication, and whatever components you need to do your processing in cloud.
Okay. Glenn asks a question. What does the future look like beyond 256 channels, parentheses, stems? He says at 5.1.4, every tape machine output is 10 stems. Transmission output can be 16 channels. We will run out of DSPs very quickly in advanced productions.
I guess I should take that one then. From a console point of view, yeah, it's a valid point that when you're doing an immersive audio production, the channel count and the bus count can be high. And yeah, on the ground, our processing goes up to 800 paths, and it's something it's on the roadmap. It's being worked on. I think again, it very much it depends on the scenario that you're in, the environment, the kind of show that you're doing, and what the cloud is being used for. We've so far 256 paths has catered for a hell of a lot, but yeah, we know that as things grow and as immersive production takes off, there may be the need to expand on that in the future.
Okay. I think this is we've gotten to most of the great questions here. Oh, wait, here's another question. Can you elaborate on Dante AV and cloud use?
I should probably take that one. Dante AV, we're super proud of being able to bring out video, of course, and into the Dante ecosystem and move video just like we're doing audio. Today, we're not, we don't have a Dante AV solution that goes into the Direct Connect environment. That is on our roadmap. I will beg your pardon to give you an exact date just yet, but that is something that we're very much interested in and looking at and pursuing. One of the things that we have there too, though, is that where we find the Dante AV customers in the use cases. We're very much driven on customer demand, and that's one of the things where I think that when we're talking cloud production today and everything, most people that we talk to are seeking just like the conversation that was question answered previously, how we deal with the explosion of audio stems and how we can ensure that our cloud productions, have an audio, a true audio first production workflow. So video will come along, but you'll have to stay tuned for that.
All right, thank you. One other question here that we've been talking a lot about broadcast production workflows. And Harold asked a question about, will you go over front of house implications, location, et cetera? It seems as if this product for sound outside of the venue is kind of a perfect fit. So what are your thoughts?
I like this question, and if I can start, Bernie, I'm going to throw this to you, hopefully, to get your thoughts on it too. But I can say from the Dante Connect standpoint, we've actually had a few interesting proof of concepts for front of house. Now, I don't think anybody would like necessarily utilize this for there's nothing like being in the room in front of the a really good PA with a fantastic band. I would never want to, well, I don't think I'd personally want to not have that experience. But from a technical standpoint, especially as being able to extend out and get different mixes or having, say, a broadcast mix from a front of house mix and different things, we've definitely had some interesting proof of concepts and some expansion looking at from that standpoint. So I'm actually excited to see what capabilities that we're able to bring out and what some customers utilize the cloud to enhance and to do different things. Again, because now we're on the network, now you have a layer of abstraction where you can use and manipulate and work with the media in ways that you previously wouldn't have. But I think I would like Bernie to really give probably a more while I'm excited and optimistic over here, I'd probably like give Bernie an opportunity to talk about realities from a console standpoint.
I think you've covered it really well. I think it's always interesting to have those use cases brought to us as well for our customers to come and say, we're thinking about doing this thing. Can you help us make it happen? And we love having those conversations. I think from an audio viewpoint, where like one thing to remember is if there is audio processing happening, which needs to be low latency, like very low latency. There are times when, like, if you have sound coming from a microphone in a venue going into somebody's ear, you will need a level of processing on site for the latency to be low enough for that to happen. There's also the factor that Will mentions of if it's a front of house event, like being in the room to know what it actually sounds like will be a key factor. However, that doesn't mean that you can't have either remote control of some elements of that or remote monitoring of it. And that's something that we've been involved in a number of tests and a number of use cases with customers where they're doing things like this today, and they will have a surface in another location. They can control remotely the mixer and the Dante network that is on site at a venue, and that could extend to front of house applications. But I think Will's points are very valid, and it will be certainly an interesting area to see what comes in the future.
Okay. Couple other questions here. Nilesh asks, what is the bandwidth consumption per channel?
1.5 meg per channel, but Dante works with flows, so 6 meg.
Okay. Here's another question from Harold. For hands-on fader users, what are the remote hardware interfaces that are available? I think that one's probably for you, Bernie.
Yeah, so we go from in the System T world, we go from a 16 fader desktop tile, we call it, so something that you can put on your desk, connect to a computer in front of you, that then connects up to the cloud. That gives you 16 faders, and again, it's the same set of controls that you would see on other hardware, System T hardware models. You can have multiple of those fader tiles if you want 32, 48, 64 faders. They are SSL units that connect to our software so that we can make the most out of that and build the user experience that our users want. Or it can be an entire control surface can be connected up to the network, and so you have a dedicated hardware surface that connects to your cloud environment to mix with.
Okay, thank you, Bernie. Just a reminder, some of you have been raising your hands. If you could please enter your questions in the Q&A panel, then we can get to your questions. We do not allow participants to speak. So Andy asks, will Dante come out with an AWS-centered class similar to Dante 123 courses or specific AWS networking setup classes? If you're aware right now, we do offer free training, Dante level 1s, 2, and 3, as well as a Dante mastery class that happens in a variety of different places in the world that you can attend live in person with hands-on equipment. Right now, I'm not aware of any classes that we're specifically planning for AWS or other cloud systems. Are any of you aware of any?
Well, our intent is to we're providing technology that is I think a bit more agnostic to the cloud. While most of our customers and users and clientele are working with AWS, this actually can work on multiple different platforms and environments. So I don't believe there's any plans to be specific about that. Although we featured AWS, of course, quite specifically here. But to your point, Jim, the Dante certification courses, I mean, this is Dante when he goes on that. We can combine that, and if anyone has specific questions or is kind of looking for some guidance on maybe where to get started and some different things, AWS actually has a really fantastic training program about how to get into networking and understanding like how networking and routing and DNS and all the various things operate within the AWS environment. So having Audinate, you kind of recreate that when it's so fantastically put together for the platforms, may not be the best way to go about it. But if people have specific questions, that's what we're here for. Like we definitely can deliver some guidance and point you in a direction.
Here's another question. Andy asks, what if AWS Direct Connect isn't available in your area? Say a contribution environment that has to use satellite. How do we get the audio into AWS or another cloud provider to be mixed from a remote station with lower latency?
So I'll just say this on the product side. There's a couple of different things. We do have what we call our remote contributor, which actually does utilize a compressed compression through WebRTC to deliver channels into the Dante Connect environment. So that's the simplest, let's call it the quick and dirty option. We do have partners that will allow for some similar type of compression, making it Dante work or look at on both sides. I've mentioned, I think, the Sienna processing engine a couple times. I think they have some capabilities to be able to do some particular things there. So there are some options depending on your specific needs and environment. But again, that's why we are currently working through reselling partners. But if you have something specific, please feel free. You have my email there. We can take a look and see if there's a solution for you.
Here's another question. It says, it seems like Dante Connect is specifically marketed toward cloud production. Can it be used, and how effective would it be for simply transporting signals between sites?
Yeah, I think Ahmed, you mentioned something about we had some examples before, right? And I'll just quickly say that yes, Dante Connect is really intended and marketed for the when you actually have a cloud environment and you are really want to manipulate and work with those media signals in the cloud environment. Utilizing cloud as just specifically transport, that can be thought about slightly differently.
I agree. So, like I said, I think it was a slightly a different variation of this question. So if you're trying to connect two campuses, it's very different from having processing in cloud and utilizing that whole idea of virtual workload. It really depends on your application.
So a couple of people have mentioned Office Hours Global as a forum for cloud education and Office Hours in particular. Yes, we would be happy to work with the Office Hours team to speak with them a little bit more and provide that as an avenue for education on how to use Dante Connect as well. Now this one, I'm not sure I understand. All right, I think we've covered a lot of topics here. If there are topics that you still would like to have answered, please feel free to email any of us directly. We're happy to answer your questions. I'd like to thank all of you who were in attendance today. Once again, we will be sending out a link to the recording of this webcast, and that will include a link to the previous webcast as well, if you'd like to view them personally again, or would like to forward them to others in your organization to view. Once again, thank you so much for spending a little over an hour with us today, and hope you learned a little bit more about cloud-based production using Dante and SSL products. Thank you.